Kia ora! Welcome aboard Koru Wilderness Images half-day photography tour of Lees Valley in North Canterbury. We begin our tour, we make our way north up the Christchurch Northern Motorway, transiting past the Christchurch City Airport, just coming up and off to our left now. And we head up and across the mighty Waimakariri River before turning off at Tram Road, transiting through some stunning farm scenery before we arrive at the town of Oxford, where we turn off once again before heading up to the always stunningly scenic Ashley Gorge for our first stop. And from there we'll head up into Lees Valley to enjoy the scenery there, and lots of photographs I hope. Should be a nice day before we make our way back to Christchurch. So settle back and enjoy the ride, and we'll pop up every now and then with some interesting commentary along the way. The Waimakariri River, which we will be crossing shortly, is generally interpreted to mean cold rushing waters. Now, the river is one of the largest in Canterbury, flowing for 151 kilometres or 94 miles from the eastern flanks of the Southern Alps near Arthur's Pass out to the Pacific Ocean. A braided river for much of its length, it consists of wide shingle beds, although it does get squeezed through a narrow canyon known as the Waimakariri Gorge, before once again becoming a braided river as it crosses the Canterbury Plains and empties into the Pacific Ocean near the town of Kaiapoi. Okay, just up here on our left we're going to turn off onto Tram Road and begin that drive across through some marvellous Canterbury farmland across to the town of Oxford. In just a moment we're going to pass through the settlement of Mandeville. Mandeville is one of a number of former farming settlements in North Canterbury that have effectively become dormitory or sleeper towns providing workers to Christchurch City. Okay folks, we're just coming into Oxford now, where we turn off to our right and head towards the Ashley Gorge. Now, Oxford was originally a logging town before settling into its current role of servicing the local farming community of North Canterbury, and up until 1959 the town even had its own branch railway with 2 stations. Now, the town is thought to have been named after the then Bishop of Oxford by the Canterbury Association in 1849. Right folks, so we're just going to make a quick stop here at the Ashley Gorge Scenic Reserve. Now, the Scenic Reserve, if you're not already aware, actually shares the entrance with the Ashley Gorge Kiwi Holiday Park, but we're going to duck around the back and down to the reserve picnic area. Just a quick stop for you to stretch your legs before we head into Lees Valley. If you wander down to the riverbank itself, there's some great photos to be had. This is where the Ashley River empties out of the Ashley Gorge and onto the Canterbury Plains. Okay folks, well I hope we've got everyone back on board. Hope you all made use of the facilities if need be. That's the last public facilities available, as there are none up in the Lees Valley itself. Very shortly we're going to turn off the main road onto Lees Valley proper. Now that road is a gravel road. Hopefully it won't be too uncomfortable. We'll just take our time, work our way through and enjoy the scenery. A number of photo stops along the way. And the first of our Lees Valleys stops just up here ahead of us, with great views back out over the Canterbury Plains. Okay folks, I hope we've got everyone back on board. We'll move on with our tour. Now this is where the Lees Valley Road starts proper, and for those of you that are prone to car sickness, I just warn you now, it is quite tight and windy. Now the road has earned over the years a degree of notoriety, such that a visiting gentleman in 1957 was heard to describe the road as a £100,000, 17.5 mile lifeline and allergic to slips and washouts. But I don't think that's going to be our problem today, so we'll just enjoy the drive, and we'll take our time as we come through here. Certainly some spectacular scenery. And just up here on the next bend, we're going to make our next stop, and you can look back the way we've came, and the lay of the land certainly gives you an idea of how landlocked Lees Valley is compared to the rest of Canterbury. Well, we're just going to make our way slowly down the hill here folks to the middle Ashley River Bridge, and just one more wee stop along the way down the hill, and a spectacular overview of the bridge and the Ashley River and its valley beyond. Parts of the road, particularly now that we've crossed the river and are driving along the shaded slopes, are extremely prone to icing in winter and can be quite treacherous. Fortunately today relatively mild, we certainly won't have that problem, but as we come up around these next few corners, I think you can certainly appreciate how it could ice up quite quickly and become dangerously unsafe to drive on. And just to let you know, we're going to stop again shortly on one of these tight right-handers, and some great outlooks back down the Ashley River as it snakes its way through the valley floor. It also gives you some appreciation how high we've climbed in that short time since we crossed the Ashley River Bridge. And just up ahead of us in a few moments, as we go around the next tight left-hander, you'll see some signs on the right-hand side of the road. That's part of the Mount Thomas Forest Conservation Area, and we're driving along the edge of it for just a few minutes here. Okay, now that we've got everyone back on board, we'll continue our journey down to Lees Valley, and a little bit of history about the area along the way. So one of the first farms or runs in the area was known as Wharfdale. Now Wharfdale was also listed as Run 21 on the early Canterbury farming run lists, and it consisted of just over 23,000 acres. Now that was taken up in 1856 by two brothers by the name of Lee, who called it Wharfdale after Wharfdale in Yorkshire in the UK. And then in April 1857, the two brothers added two additional runs of 5,000 acres each, making a total for themselves of quite a good sized station of just over 33,000 acres combined. And of course, needless to say, even after the Lee brothers left the area, the valley of course retained their name, hence Lees Valley, and that name still stands today. Now in those early days, the only way in was over the Blowhard Hill, and in bad winters all communication was cut off for months at a time. And by the late 1870s, the Honourable Edward Richardson had taken over Wharfdale along with some other parcels of land in the area. Now those parcels of land in turn were subsequently taken over by the Bank of New Zealand in the late 1880s. And pretty much the entire valley was brought back by the government, both freehold and leasehold, in 1917 and subdivided the whole lot amongst returning soldiers from the aftermath of World War I. The ensuing Lees Valley settlement was probably one of the most notorious farming settlements in Canterbury, thanks to the geography of the area creating a very arid, cold and hard landscape to try and eke out a living on. Now, those early settlers had to live in a primitive world of their own, and the huts in which many small families grew up in consisted of no more than basic shacks with very, very little amenities, and food and supplies only brought in once a month in the very best of weather. Lees Valley was also so isolated that it's had its own school. The school itself consisted of a small one-room corrugated iron building standing out on its own in the middle of the valley. A few miles further on, the school committee had built a one-room shack out of corrugated iron and Pinex for the teacher being supplied their meals free of charge at one of the local farmhouses in return for picking up and delivering the children to and from school each day. And the bridge that we're about to cross over now is known colloquially as the Banana Bridge, and I bet you cannot guess why. And today, all of those smaller farms have been amalgamated into two bigger ones. The first one being the 27,000 hectare Lees Valley or Mount Pembroke Station, and the smaller 6,500 hectare Richon Station at the head of the valley. Both stations feature mixed stock with a mixture of cattle, sheep and deer spread across those farmlands. Now, speaking of sheep and cattle, one of the big risks that the farmers in Lees Valley face today is the winter snows, with only having one way in and out of the valley and the road being prone to winter weather and potentially being closed for up to a month. It's imperative that the farmers move any stock that they're going to lowland farms on the Canterbury Plains before the winter weather sets in. in just a moment we're going to make our next photo stop, and you'll be able to look along the valley in the direction that we're going to travel and watch the road as it snakes up the hill on the other side of the valley that we're going to cross down into and back across the bridge. Also a couple of shots of the general geography in the area, including the river flowing through the valley floor. Okay, now that we've got everyone back on board, we're going to carry on making our way down the hill here, down to the Middle Ashley River Bridge that we crossed on our way in. We're going to stop just before the bridge. We can hop out and enjoy some photos of the scenery around the bridge, including some beautiful green river pools and the remnants of some earlier bridge structures that add to the scenery and add to the story. Okay folks, we're just going to make our way back over the Ashley River here, also known as Rakahuri, in recognition of the 1998 Māori Ngāi Tahu Treaty of Waitangi settlement claims. The river runs for about 65 kilometres or 40 odd miles from the western slopes of Lees Valley through the Ashley Gorge that we're just going to climb up above now, and exits out into the sea and the Canterbury Plains near the township of Pegasus. Now the open river flats at that end of the river are well known for migratory birds that winter over in the area. We're going to stop just here pretty much for our last photo stop. A great example looking down on the river of the sinuous nature of the Ashley River as it winds its way through the Ashley Gorge. So tight does it curve around on itself at times that it almost joins up on itself again as it curves around the hills. Just ahead of us, we're going to cross over a cattle grate. Yes, you will have noticed that we've crossed over quite a few of them earlier. The idea of these cattle grates is clearly what the name says, is to keep the cattle and sheep and other livestock from wandering off the farm properties while still leaving the road open and able to be driven on. We're just going to make our way around the last corner here as we exit over the ridgeline and drop out of Lees Valley, and we'll work our way back down onto the Canterbury Plains before we return to Christchurch. We're just going to make our way back into and through Oxford. A good opportunity. We could potentially stop at the local dairy if anybody would like an ice cream, but if not, we will press on and carry on heading back towards Christchurch. Folks, as we continue our journey back towards Christchurch, we thought we'd tell you a little bit about the geology and geography of the Canterbury Plains. Now, the Canterbury Plains were thought to have formed from moraine gravels left behind during glacial periods, sort of between 3 million and 10,000 years ago. And those gravels were then modified by several of the larger rivers in the area, including the Waimakariri River, and the Rangitata rivers. The land itself today is considered suitable for intensive livestock farming, but it is prone to drought, particularly when we get the northwest wind. Having said that, the northwest wind does create some quite spectacular cloud formations in the shape of a gigantic arch across the top of the mountains, colloquially known as the Northwest Arch. We're just turning back onto the Christchurch Northern Motorway here, and I do apologise for the road cones and the roadworks. A number of major extensions required over the last few years due to growing population in the area. Okay folks, well we're just coming back into the outskirts of Christchurch City now, pretty much the end of our tour. I must say it's been a pleasure having you along, and we certainly hope you've enjoyed the ride. Managed to pick up some great photos for yourself and for your memories, for your family. Again, thank you very much for joining us. Just sit back and relax as we make our way the last few kilometres back into Christchurch City.